Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Dog Walk, the almost daily, uncut, unedited, one take show where I take my usually dogs out, but today it's only Mistra because it's still very cold. Daisy can't tolerate this type of temperature without freezing. Discuss a little bit about myself and whatever's been on my mind that day. So today's episode is hopefully going to be a quick one because, as I said, it's very cold and I have a feeling that my hand is going to be freezing very, very soon. So, and also being a little bit mentally fatigued as it's the weekend, so I managed to edit subtitles on 2 different episodes, which took several hours. So I'm pretty mentally drained today. Luckily, my spouse wanted to take care of Felix for most of the day, so that gave me a bit more time. So that being said, I'm going to talk about a topic a little bit more quickly than usual that's related both to me and the actual topic. So I hinted at this several times in several videos, but what I want to talk about today is martial arts, specifically traditional martial arts, and why that's what I do as opposed to more quote unquote modern or effective martial arts. Now, I'll start with a little bit of background in this case. So, I started to do karate when I was 5 or 6 years old at a very young age, and I did it consistently and with a lot of passion to the point where actually, as I mentioned in another episode also, I even stopped playing hockey and several other activities. I was spending 3 to 4 days per week in classes. Yeah, it was 3 classes per week plus a free training session on the weekend, and on top of that, I was fully into it. Like, my parents made special arrangements with my grade school so that I would have a private room after class in which I could do my homework, so that I would have that done by the time they came to pick me up, so that I could go to my karate training sessions, etc. I competed at quite a high level when I was young. I did Shotokan Karate, and I was in a school that, despite being in a town of literally 12,000 people total, we had a dojo that would routinely send 20 people to the provincial championships of Quebec. Imagine, like, that's kind of the state championships, but Quebec is one of the most populous provinces in Canada, right? And we'd send 20 people and come back with 35 medals. I think there's only 2 competitions ever where I did not return with 2 gold medals, including provincial championships. I was quite good. We even had in our dojo a double world champion, gold medal in both kata and kumite, which is fighting or point fighting in karate, and a 3rd place at the Worlds, and I believe there was someone else, but I don't recall. Oh, this guy wants to go this way. I don't recall how they ranked, so I won't state it. But basically, we had multiple world champions training with me. And when I say world champions, I'm not talking about just a championship that they held every year. It was kind of like the Olympic Games of Shotokan, where they actually held this competition only once every 4 years. So, yeah, karate was a huge part of my identity as a young person. The reason, I guess I'll go a little bit further into the background before I explain why that's what I still like to practice to this day, although I did take detours through other martial arts. Basically, to summarize a very long story, as I mentioned previously, I stopped hockey and a bunch of other things in order to concentrate fully on karate, and I was training in the dojo where my sensei, who had trained the world champions, was telling me, yes, crap, I just said my name. I think that might be the one edit I'll have to do ever on this channel, so you'll see a little cut. What I cut out was just my actual name. Sorry about that. I'm not quite ready to reveal that yet, so pardon for the one edit ever on this channel to the actual video. So yeah, my sensei was telling me that I was going to be a world champion, right? I did fundraising and everything to go to the world championships. That again was once every 4 years only, and I made the Canadian national team, all that stuff. And the competition that I was going to go to was the first time in a few decades, I believe, that they were actually going to hold the competition in Tokyo, in Japan. So I was going to Japan to compete in a world championship of karate. For a kid from the 80s who grew up religiously watching Karate Kid, it doesn't get better than that, right? I'm sure you youngins who might have watched Cobra Kai. Speaking of which, I wonder when the new season, if there's a new season, when it's gonna come out. Anyway, I'm sure you can understand how important that was to me. Well, to fast forward a few years, about, I want to say, a year to 10 months before the actual competition was going to take place, my sensei takes me aside and tells me, I have really bad news for you. I just found out that this year, for whatever reason, if there was a reason, either he didn't give it to me or I don't remember it, but for that competition, they were going to up the minimum age to 16 years old. And at the time, I was 11, just about to turn 12, which was previously the minimum age to go compete at the World Championships. So, as a young preteen who's just switching, well, everything is changing in my life, right? Going from grade school to, in Quebec, we go straight from grade school to high school. We have 6 years of grade school and 5 years of high school, and then 4 years of university. So everything was changing in my life, and I find out that the one goal that I had in front of me for years was suddenly taken out from under me, and there was nothing that I could do about it. And it wasn't because of my skill or injury or anything like that. It was something that was completely under control. They upped the minimum age. Well, that completely discouraged me and led me to maybe 6 months later, after I passed my last belt exam, quit karate and move on to other things. And I did so many other sports since then, but that's why I first stopped karate when I was a youngin. Sorry, I'm just reminiscing a little bit. Let's move on. Since then, I ended up doing several other martial arts. When I went to university, I did traditional Japanese jiu-jitsu as opposed to Brazilian jiu-jitsu, which is very well known today. Japanese jiu-jitsu being actually quite different from Brazilian jiu-jitsu. It's not at all. It's focused solely on groundwork. Japanese jiu-jitsu is actually the martial art that's kind of at the origin of... Sorry, I just think that the trees look really nice with the frost in them because it's so cold. But I digress. It's actually... Jiu-jitsu was actually kind of original martial art that spawned all the other Japanese martial arts like judo and kendo and all that stuff. So you had weapon work, you had throws, you had groundwork, you had strikes. Karate is actually Okinawan in origin, but it was Japanicized early in the 1920s. I don't want to get into the history of karate. My point is that I did other martial arts such as that. Then after university, my friends took me to several other martial arts that I tried out, like Krav Maga and a few other ones. Those, although I did 2 years of jiu-jitsu in university before I graduated, those other martial arts never really stuck to me because of one of the first reasons why, and let's transition now, one of the first reasons why I prefer traditional martial arts, it's the attitude, it's the mentality. These martial arts like Krav Maga are all about being the tough guy in the room who wants to destroy his opponent in the least amount of moves. And that's just not me. Throughout my entire quote-unquote career in karate, what I think that it brought the most to me, other than physical strength and awareness of body, because when you're training to be world champion, you have to realize when your foot is 2 degrees off the straight line, or your hip is a little 2 centimeters higher on one side than the other, because that form, that's what matters. That's what you get judged on. That's what makes you go from second to first place, right? So it gave me an amazing awareness of my body that I still retain to this day. In fact, that's one of the comments that I always get from my physiotherapists that I've seen on several occasions, because I've injured myself a lot since I was a kid. Although, when I was a kid, except for maybe an ankle sprain that happened playing soccer, I never injured myself. I think that's in no small part due to karate and how it trained my body to know itself. Which is something that I think you can also get from other martial arts, like let's say Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu with groundwork, but in a much more limited fashion, because you're much more in tune with your opponent and their body and how it is interacting with you for those martial arts, if that makes sense. Whereas my love in karate was mostly always kata, which is a form that you do individually by yourself. So yeah, body awareness was one thing that I got. But the other main thing that I got from karate is the attitude, the discipline, the focus, the ability to, as a very young child, keep my attention razor sharp for hours while practicing forms is not something that is very much trained in other activities that children undertake. It's even for like group sports or things like that, hockey, other than maybe something like gymnastics. I don't know, I never did gymnastics officially, but I think that there's very few activities that are sports activities that train your focus in such and your discipline in such a manner. It's also a question of philosophy, to go back to Krav Maga, right? Which is the whole destroy your opponent in one move type thing. I remember, because I did a seminar with actually the founder of the Shotokan Karate International Foundation, Hirokazu Kanazawa, who has now passed away. But he was actually the first ever winner of the All Japan Karate Championship back in, I want to say, 1956 or something like that. He is a legend in the world of karate. Anyway, I got the chance to train under him. And I have actually a painting from him, a signature, which has kind of a little mantra next to his name, which he wrote down, which is the philosophy of karate brings peace of mind. And that is really, in a nutshell, if I had only one sentence to explain it, that's why I do karate as opposed to other combat sports, like even not necessarily martial arts, although you could consider them martial arts actually, but things like wrestling or boxing, those types of things, they're much more sports. Karate is training your mind at the same time as your body, and that's why I truly prefer that. Now, I'm gonna keep going because there's other reasons why I prefer traditional martial arts. First one being, if you've seen any of my videos thus far, or even just watching this one, you'll notice that it's actually almost midnight right now on a Saturday night. I'm walking around in parks in my neighborhood and no one's around. I feel completely safe. I am in a first world country. I do not need to fight. That's not me. In fact, the first goal that they teach you in karate is that any way possible, the best way to fight is to not fight at all. It's to avoid the fight. It's not have the best karate master is the master who never has to use his karate, because he is able to detect situations that are risky and get out of them. So that's another thing that pushes me more towards traditional martial arts as opposed to combat sports. It's the mental attitude, because when all you breed is that anger, that willing, that wanting to fight and to win all the time, it kind of pushes you almost in the direction of fighting. It's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. It makes you more prone, more willing to immediately drop the gloves, quote, to use hockey speak, right? Whereas again, karate encourages you to get away from that situation, to not even be there in the first place. So that's something that has stayed with me throughout my life, and it's not because I can't fight that I don't fight. It's because I don't want to fight. I choose not to fight because I don't want to injure myself or others. I don't have to, right? I won't mention several other videos, but I think it's pretty clear by the way I've spoken in other videos that even though I'm in the military, I am not a person who preaches violence or confrontation. I joined the military first because it was the best way in my mind to get close to working in the domain of space, which at the time wasn't really a big domain. The only way you could have anything to do related to space was to work at the government. And I did manage to achieve that. I worked at the space agency, Canadian Space Agency. I in fact have a mission patch from Chris Hadfield, the first ever Canadian astronaut to do a spacewalk, from the mission where he did that spacewalk in my house. That's one of my treasures. Anyway, I'm sort of losing my train of thought here. Misa, this way. Let's go this way. Yeah, so I don't want to fight. It's a question of attitude. Sorry, I completely lost my train of thought there because I reminisced about that patch. Where was I going with this? Yes. No, not quite. Anyway, let's keep going with other points, I guess. I'll also mention that it's also maybe perhaps a question of of physical limitation at this point, because I have, through other activities, dislocated my right elbow 7 times. Each time I put it back in place myself. I've never had to go to a hospital to actually get it fixed, but it's kind of mentally challenging and physically risky to be practicing arm bars in a judo or jujitsu class when you've already dislocated your elbow 7 times. I also have, this is more recent though, but I've had knee surgery. I tore my ACL, which limited some of my options, I'll say. Although that hasn't actually affected my choice, because that injury happened just a few years ago in 2021. So by that time, I was heavily entrenched into going back to karate. Oh yeah, I guess I'll mention how I got back into karate was the pandemic. I needed something to get me off my butt, and I was at home, right? So I came back to something that was familiar to me and that I could do by myself, which is karate forms, kata. And that's another advantage of traditional martial arts. Everyone says kata are useless and blah blah blah, they're not real fights, but that's probably first because they don't understand bunkai, which is a practical application of the moves that you learn in the kata. But also, these are people who have the luxury of having unlimited or as much as they want access to a training gym and training partners. And that's not the case for everyone. I've got the luxury doing karate, and the same thing would be true for, let's say, taekwondo or many other traditional martial arts, to just go in my basement and do it. It's kind of hard to practice a takedown or submission by yourself in your basement whenever you want. Not impossible, but very much more difficult. So that's another advantage of traditional martial arts and their forms compared to more modern combat sports. Now, that's not true of all combat sports, right? Boxing famously has shadow boxing, and if you buy a bag, you can do a lot of boxing conditioning by yourself in your basement. So it's not applicable to every martial art, every modern combat sport, but definitely an advantage of these more traditional martial arts like karate compared to the grappling arts. So mental attitude, physical body awareness, it's also just plain great exercise. But it's only great exercise, and that's what, to use a cliche expression, nice moon, it's kind of what separates the wheat from the chaff in the sense of traditional martial arts, because trust me, it is very easy to quote unquote fake your way through a kata. And by that I mean you can go through the forms, go through the motions, but not, I don't know how to say, not apply power, not fully tense your body, not really do it, even though you are doing it. And there's several schools that I've seen, and I think that was one of the big differences and the big reason why my school, when I was a young one, won so many tournaments. It's that our sensei did not accept cheating, and our sensei spent years and years honing the basics. I did karate for 6 years before, and I didn't even reach brown belt level. I only learned 5 katas over 6 years or 7 years, possibly even. But those basics those fundamentals, yeah, sure, by the time I was 35, before I restarted doing karate, the exact sequences of movements and all that, I had pieces of it, but I didn't have the entire puzzle. But the actual body kinematics of it stayed with me my entire life and gave me reflexes and ability to get my body out of situation and to avoid several injuries that should have been injuries. Stuff like, I remember pardon for anyone who knows me and who'll be disappointed by this, but I was drunk in Saguenay after a nice night out. I was on temporary duty there, working on fighter jet testing. I wasn't driving or anything, don't worry about it, but I was drunk, and there was the back of a cube van that was parked right next to a loading dock at the back of the brewery where we had just had a lot of beer. And my friend and I had this great idea of climbing. I wanted to show my stuff, so I started to climb with my back to the wall and my feet on the cube van, and I climbed all the way to the top of the height of the cube van. So imagine that. And long story short, my foot slips, and in the 2-3 meters, oh yeah, and to get there, it's a loading ramp, right? So you've got stairs, and it's elevated, and there was a ramp there, or a guardrail, whatever you want to call it, a 2x4 on the side, or maybe a 1x4. Anyway, there was wood on the side, a railing, and long story short, my foot slipped, I fall, and in that fraction of a second, I had the reflex to put my foot down exactly onto that 1.5-inch wide piece of wood to cushion the fall, as opposed to fall onto it or onto the side and slip, and then use that to roll to the side, get onto the ground, and rolled on the ground, and I was completely unscathed. And I remember the people there's jaw dropping, just like, what just happened, and how did you not just fall and destroy your groin or injure yourself? No, I was completely fine, and this was while drunk. So like, my body has kept the basics that were hammered into me for years and years and years. And that was another advantage, at least of my school of karate, compared to several others, because that's one thing to go back. That was a long detour to say that one of the reasons why we won so many competitions and so many medals was that other schools, I noticed, senseis would let their students, kids be kids, and let them be more, how do I say, accept imperfections. And it showed, and that's why we won all the time, and they didn't. Because many senseis, and this is still a thing to this day, they were there to make money, and they made money by getting their students to pass belt exams and having them pay for new belts, and that also kept their interest, right? Because they're seeing their progression. I spent 3 years at the white and yellow belt levels. Meanwhile, I've seen other dojos where people earn their black belts within less than 2 years. So anyway, I don't want to get into there's so many channels who cover the fake martial arts and the fake schools and all that. I don't want to get into that. But yeah, that was another. Because of the mental discipline that my sensei instilled in me, I was still motivated, even though I wasn't necessarily progressing that fast in belt levels. And that didn't really matter to me because I was I was enjoying it and I was benefiting from it. So anyway, I feel like I've gotten a little bit too far back into talking about myself. Maybe that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's kind of more of a testimonial than a true point I want to bring about, like in my other videos. But yeah, that's why when the pandemic hit and I had to do something to keep myself occupied, instead of saying, I'm going to lift weights or whatever, I'm going to go just run outside, I chose to restart karate because of all the benefits that I had, and enough time had passed that the hurt and the deception of losing my at that point life goal to something that was circumstances that were completely out of my control, that had kind of healed over enough that I was ready to start. And I'm sad that I lost so much time, but hey, it is what it is, and now I'm glad that I'm able to do it, to restart it. I've also matured enough that, and this I think in no small part is again due to doing karate and not being always motivated just by getting the next belt. It's at this point, like I've been lucky to, for 6 months after the pandemic, train under Kenzo Dozono, who is a 9th Dan master who's been doing karate for decades before I was born. He was a head instructor and head evaluator for Shotokan Karate for a long time, and blah blah blah. Anyway, I'm at the point now where what's there, where I am, thanks to karate, and that has kept up with me in several other domains throughout my life. I am fully self-motivated. I don't really care. You might have noticed in other videos also, I don't really care what other people think or what they think that I should think. I go about and I do my thing. So I was lucky enough that I've learned from a great master literally every single one of the 26 Shotokan Karate katas except for 2. And I won't say that I've perfected them, far from it, but enough that I feel confident in practicing them all by myself. I hope I did say all of the 26 except for 2. There's the Gankaku that... no, sorry, what am I saying? Goju Shihos that I do not know. But anyway, point is that I know all of these things that normally I taught somewhere around the 3rd, 4th, or 5th Dan level, because black belt is not the end of the journey like most people think. It's the start. Black belt usually is when you become proficient enough to truly train. So I know all of that, yet officially I'm still a brown belt because I didn't have enough training time as an adult to meet the time prerequisites after having held my brown belt to be given my black belt. I only trained with Sensei Dozono for 6 months, right? But I trained a whole lot by myself in my basement during that time and since then. So I don't have a black belt. And you know what? I don't actually care because I'm not training to get the accolades of someone else. I'm training for myself, and I'm training to be able to, if he's interested in it, pass on this knowledge to my son. That's what's important to me, not the color of the thing that holds my uniform, unlike many people. And that's also why I kind of sometimes laugh at all the black belts that you see everywhere, as I said, who gained their black belt after 2 years of training, just like I sometimes laugh at these people who did one tour of duty in the military for 4 years and then who associate their entire identity to having been a Marine for the rest of their entire life, even though they spent more time in high school and middle school than they did in the military, right? Meanwhile, I've been in the military for 24 years almost soon, and and I don't feel the need to tattoo RCAF everywhere on my chest to show, right? So anyway, I guess go back to karate and traditional martial arts, right? It brought me sort of that self-confidence and lack of need of outside validation of me or what I'm doing. It's a mental strength that is really, again, to me, the key, the benefit of martial arts. And as I was saying at the start of my talk, yes, karate, or I should say no, karate may not be quote-unquote the most effective martial art ever. It's not MMA, it's not all these things, right? But also, here, I am. I don't need to fight. I live in a world, or I live in a first world country where I don't need to physically defend my property. I do not physically fear for my safety when I walk down the street, even if I'm in a big city like Montreal or Toronto or this or that. And also, I realize that we live in a world where guns exist, and it doesn't matter how good of a martial artist you are or how fast you can swing your sword. If someone truly wants to take you out in the modern world, unless they are extremely incompetent and watch too many movies, I'm sorry, but gun trumps knife hand. And unless you're Rurouni Kenshin or something like that, gun also trumps sword or knife, right? So really, this whole obsession with effectiveness of your martial art, I think, is completely misguided, because the reality is, at least my reality, I should say, is that I'm not gonna fight anyone in the street. I'm 40 years old anyway, right? So really, I think that everyone who focuses on that and who chooses their martial art solely on what they read online in a forum about this martial art being more effective in the real world than that martial art, I think they are completely missing the point. I do martial arts to get that mental focus, to get that physical fitness, and not to fight people. And so really, when you think about it, what's more important is not necessarily actually which martial art you practice. Is it Taekwondo? Is it Judo? Is it Karate? Is it Krav Maga? What matters to me, I think, the most is who are you training with? What is their attitude? And what are they teaching you to do? How do they treat the world around them? And what kind of person is that martial art shaping you to become? I don't want my martial art to shape me to become a violent person who's always out seeking fights. The opposite, right? Especially at my age. And same thing for my son, right? He can get that self-confidence of knowing that he can defend himself. Now, I won't let him be like me, because when I was young, and especially since it was the 80s and people didn't know as much as they know now, right? So I truly believed when I was a 12-year-old that because of being so good at karate, any adult man who attacked me would be knocked out, right? I could defend myself. Now, I have no illusions, and especially if I highly recommend that you check out, if you have that type of illusion of thinking that technique trumps everything. You really should check out Ramsey Dewey's channel. He debunks that so well. Technique doesn't trump everything. If I'm sorry to say, but if you're a short, scrawny, 5'5" person, when someone like the size of The Rock or whoever else you want to picture, a big guy like that attacks you, like, unless you're very lucky, your technique won't really actually matter. And also, when you look at the people who do martial arts, in most cases, yes, there are a lot of elite athletes in martial arts, just like in everything else, but that's not the reality of most students. Most students are not world champions. Most students are not Bruce Lee or Jackie Chan or whoever, Jos St. Pierre, or whoever your hero is, right? Even if you're doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, right? Which, it's super effective, right? But you have to be on the ground to do it. Well, I'm sorry, but look at the ground here. Do you really want to throw yourself onto this icy asphalt? It's not a soft mat like in your dojo in the real world, right? So, and there's curves, which can, anyway, curves, I meant curbs, like these things, right, on the side of the street. So, I guess to close off the discussion, and I feel like I've missed several points on why I prefer traditional martial arts. But to close the discussion, I really think that to choose your martial art based on effectiveness, unless your plan is to become a street fighter, or unless your plan is to become a professional fighter, that's misguided. Choose your dojo first, more than the martial art, because I think that matters more. And choose your dojo based on, again, the attitude of the people, what they teach you, and what kind of person they will make you become. What kind of person do you want to be? Do you want to be a warmonger, or do you want to be the cool head, reasonable person in the room? I know what I choose. So on that note, I hope you found some value to this. Are you a martial artist? Do you do any combat sports or anything like that? What's your take on this? How do you choose your art, and what do you think is the most important? Or alternatively, if you're not, have I convinced you that if ever you were to start martial arts, or if your children want to start martial arts, what are you gonna guide them towards? Let me know that in the comments. Again, I appreciate your time and your attention, and have a wonderful day.